Hey, welcome back. It's day one, post-lunch. It's about 1:20. Today is still February 11, 2017. See, we'll catalog all this stuff for the Smithsonian. What we're going to be doing now is focusing on an aspect of the Neurolight called the brain gym. If you have any residual questions about brain food, and you're satisfied with the short answer, now's your chance. Do you have any questions about brain food? That whole thing.
Garnet, last night I had seen the light stream on the ceiling, and I noticed there was a Y pattern. Does it matter which way we insert the device into our...
You mean left, right nostril?
Yeah.
No. No, there's no pulsing. Some devices have pulse because in system signaling, oftentimes pulsing appears to give some benefit because of what's called novelty theory. Remember the Bateson thing from last night? If you were there, news, information is news of change. The idea of pulsing alerts or awakens a response. This is continuous, so it doesn't pulse, and to my knowledge there's no difference between, they're both the same 5 milliwatt diode, they're both the same wavelength. That's it? Okay. Brain gym. Many of you have seen the user interface because you actually have the device and you've been using it. Some of you have maybe only seen it, and some of you have not even had a look at what the user interface is like. A little later on, we'll probably do that. But what I'd like you to understand, and I think you do, is that what we call the brain gym and what we call the brain skills are both actualized through that thing back there, the flashy light sound microphone box thing. That the brain food is that separate small unit that's around here somewhere. So let's be clear about that. Okay. When you, in case you don't realize, you need electricity and you hook it up where the holes match, and when you turn it on, the little gold box down there produces what's called a local Wi-Fi. It's got nothing to do with public Wi-Fi or anything like that. That little box is its own little generator of Wi-Fi, and you take any kind of tablet or smartphone or computer, I guess mine's over there, and you search Wi-Fi, and it's just going to say NeuroLamp with the code number of your unit, and you choose it, and now you're connected. Then you go into any browser. I usually use Safari. I'm on an iPhone. And you put in nl.com. If it's your very first time, there's a password. It's Pineal777. But once you connect it once, then it's going to recognize it unless you clear your cache and you have to put it in again. But you just go nl.com and boom, the user interface. Can you get me the iPhone? It's because of this. So you can't see from where you are much. But right now I'm controlling that thing from this because this is on Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi connection is connected to the Wi-Fi being generated from the little gold computer box down there. It's very cool. You know, I can choose a session, I can right now turn it on with this, and I can turn it off. It'll turn off in about 3 seconds. So it's very nice. Why I'm bothering to show you this is because, and some of you know it so you don't have to imagine. If you haven't ever seen it, there are just 2 radio buttons. It says Neurolight and blah 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 at the top, but you touch that and you go into the brain gym. You touch that and you go into the brain skills. It's just like door on the left, door on the right. to go into the brain gym, this is where we're going, what you're going to find are a number of choices, and we're going to talk about those. Okay, the brain gym is incredibly important, but as I say, and you understand what I mean, it's not very sexy, it's not very alluring, it doesn't seem very exciting. When you read all the things in the Brain Skills, the candy store, you know, I want that, and I want this, and there's like a lot, right?
Is that just the idea of it, or is that the experience? Like if you don't tell people...
No, but the experience is it's a full composition as compared, it's like a full sport as compared to a single exercise. The sport is going to be a lot more interesting and exciting and complicated and attractive than going and working on my stupid lats over here on the machine. So the brain gym has two aspects. There are two elements. The user interface does not show that well, and the reason is I thought I had finished the Neurolight. I thought I had done all the compositions, all the user interface, everything. And we got an invitation, we meaning myself and Guy the manufacturer, to present at this big deal medical anti-aging conference in the Philippines. So, okay, we weren't ready to launch, but what the hell, go for it. So I hurried up and I made a big PowerPoint presentation. He went there and he did the PowerPoint presentation, introduced the device, they bought a couple. It's a massively wealthy, high-ticket, private island wellness resort in the Philippines. It's like crazy. While he was there, I came across some research that had just been released 2 months earlier. I just hadn't seen it, but I saw a notification. You know, when you do research, you're like a bloodhound. You're like one reference leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. And there's just so much out there these days. Thank God for the internet, because, you know, like old library searches were, you know, you disappear for days in the columns and never come out. Now you can just flickety-click. And I came across brand new research from a project, the Connectome Harmonics project. You know, there was the Human Genome Project, and that's completed. And now NIH, it's more than 2 years ago, they initiated what's called the Connectome Harmonics Project, where they're interested in mapping out the connections within the brain. They're not interested in the DNA coding. And so there's a lot of new motivated research, and now there's academic funding for it and grants being given. And this one group went in and studied what are called the major brain networks. So the network. In the brain gym, there are some exercises, and then there are some network reinforcements. So I'm telling you why the setup looks the way it is. Then I'll break things down into details. Because it's not really evident. When you go in the brain gym, you're going to find sort of like the exercise assessment thing, then you're going to find a list of these network reinforcements. It's like, I don't understand how this relates. When I found the research, it just stunned me, because they had mapped out the 7 major brain networks in their complete frequency harmonics. Not only what frequencies, but what relationships and what sequences and what dominance, and quite complex. Had never been done before. So when I got that, I spent a couple of days and I was able to configure compositions based on the research. So now in the brain gym, there are 7 programs, you could say, each one that calibrates or tunes or reinforces a major brain network. And because we had already designed the user interface the way it was, it's like, well, what do we do? Where do we put them? Because they really kind of, they deserved kind of their own chair, their own box, you know? But it would have been a big pain in the butt to reconfigure the whole user interface, so we decided just put them as a list in the brain gym. So when you encounter it, if it seems like everything is really simple in the user interface, except the brain gym is, when you open it up, it's like assessment, training, and then you've got a bunch of these networks. That's why we stuck them there, okay? So we'll get to that later on, but I'm trying to tell you that in the brain gym, I'm going to talk about two aspects of the brain gym, even though the user interface doesn't make it clear that there are two aspects. Okay, the first aspect is the fundamental training, exercise of signals that you use to make compositions. And there are 4 categories. I always name them in the same sequence. I suggest you develop the same habit because then you'll always remember them. It's coordination, flexibility, endurance, and strength. You see, I've done that with neuroplastic training. Now, as soon as I say the first one, the rest come. It's like remembering a poem or singing a song. You tend not to remember the whole thing until you start to say it, and then it just keeps coming, right? So coordination, flexibility, endurance, and strength. Brains tend to degrade in aspects, not as whole compositions, not as whole functions. Aspects tend to degrade. Also, when I make a composition, I build a composition with parts and pieces, if you know what I mean. So, every composition is made up of parts and pieces. One part is called the coordination capacity of the signal. One is flexibility, one endurance and strength. Now I'm going to explain exactly how they're done. And to my knowledge, nobody's ever done it. I've never seen any device working with neuroplasticity or entrainment that does that. The supposition is always that your brain can handle it. But that's not true. The brain can't always handle it. So what's the first one? What I'm much reminded of are those, if you've seen them, they're in arcades and so, the dance machines where you have to do what the thing is telling you to do. You know, right foot, left, left, right, left, right. For 3 of the 4 it works well, and I'll explain the 4th. So what is the issue of exercising signal coordination? Or you could say agility training. You can go from 2 hertz to 4 hertz. 2, 4, 2, 4, 2, 4, because signals just don't stay the same. And that's the brain entrance. You can entrance, but believe me, the brain isn't like that. The brain is musical, it's compositional. You know, it's a storyteller. It's going to be doing multitudes of signal and waves all the time, and it comes through. I mean, an 80 instrument orchestra creates a unified experience, and yet they're all doing different things. So coordination, 2, 4, 2, 4, 2, 4, right? Imagine, okay, you can do that. What about 2, 4, 6, 6, 4, 2, 4, 6, 6, 4, 2. Now there's a different degree of change. The change was 2 to 4, now it's 2 to 6. There's a degree of change. And then what about 2 to 8? And 2, 8, 2, 8. So when you go into the brain gym and you choose coordination, what you're doing with sight and sound is you're exercising the brain's ability to respond to sensory signals with different degrees of change. It's about the degree of change, because sometimes signal sets don't have a lot of change. It's like a dance step where you don't really have to move your feet that much. But then there are dance steps where the change is a much greater degree. And maybe at a certain degree you can't stay graceful. You're not agile. You become clumsy. You can't do it. And it's like that in the brain. Actually, the coordination of signals is the single most important exercise for the brain at an exercise level.
When you're talking about coordination, are you talking analogously to our physical understanding, or we're talking about the same coordination patterns
Yeah.
that are involved with physical movements?
Yes, it's more the second. It's not purely, but I can tell you, to make it, because we're going to be talking about assessments as part of this, and you'll see why in a moment. The simplest way to assess a person's neuroplastic capacity and condition is just to look at them. You know, the brain is physical, the body is physical. The somatic representation is a very fair reflection of the state of the brain. So it's not that complicated. We all do it. I'm sort of tipping into the assessment part right now. We all do it. It's called neuroception. Technically, in psychophysiology, it's called neuroception. Neuroception is that automatic, unconscious evaluation that we make anytime a being, let's say a being approaches you, and you have to evaluate potential threat or safe. We read each other all the time. Everybody does it. Every animal does it. We do it. It's called neuroception. One is, some of us are aware of it, and some of us aren't. You might call it intuition, whatever you want to call it, but that we are always reading each other. You look at me, you're reading me. I mean, maybe reading isn't the word that would fit for you, but you're evaluating, you're assessing. And the most basic assessment at the deepest level is threat, no threat. That's the basic one. And depending on that, there's a feeling state that gets created, and following the feeling state, then we assign thoughts. We are feeling creatures that think, not thinking creatures that feel. So you already have the ability to assess a person's neuroplastic capacity in their brain and be pretty damned accurate. Because the way the body behaves, the soma, the way the person behaves, the tone of their voice, you know, their gaze, their stance, how they move, how they get in and out of the chair, all these things are informative. You're getting a picture of that. Now, one, you may not be aware that you're getting a picture, but you are. If you are aware that you're getting a picture, the next thing is, do you trust yourself or not? Do you trust that assessment? And a lot of us don't. The only thing I'm going to add, and I'm sort of building two things at one time here, is I'm going to give you 4 things as a template. Coordination, flexibility, endurance, strength. And I want you to think of it as being beginners. I call it foundational because it sounds better. It's like the exercise class, beginners class, intermediate class, advanced class. Right? If somebody's walking in and you have to assign them to go to an aerobics class, James. Now you don't even know that much about aerobics, but you get the basic idea. And they're coming in, and it's up to you to assign them. And all you just look at them, maybe ask them a question just to hear the tone of their voice. You say, okay, intermediate, beginners, advanced. You might not be right every time, but I bet you're pretty damn close.
But everybody in LA wants to go to strength yoga.
So, I don't even comment, right? Back to the coordination thing. If in the gym there was only coordination, there was no flexibility exercise, no endurance exercise, and no strength exercise, you'd still get great results, because that is the single number one most important basic function in the brain, because it has so many signals happening simultaneously. To have the agility to coordinate these is the biggest demand of all. It's the biggest demand. So when you go into the brain gym, and I'm floating in and out of the assessment thing. If you don't know what to do, just choose coordination. And what you'll see is every one of those 4 is ranked by the degree of neuroplastic demand. So I've got foundation coordination, intermediate coordination, and advanced coordination. So it's just like doing a dance step thing. Okay, a person lacks coordination, and you say, okay, let's do this thing, stand up, or put them on the dumb dance machine and choose beginners and just have them do the simple things that where the degree of change is not much. Deb?
So I'm doing an experiment with my husband, so I'm going to do coordination, endurance, flexibility, strength every day.
Yes.
And then repeat it every day so he doesn't do the same thing every day. And
Yes.
then how do I know when to move up to intermediate?
Okay, we'll be moving into this because I'm sort of introducing 2 things at one time. One is I'm trying to explain each of the 4 different brain exercises combined with the fact that there are 3 levels of difficulty. So there are 12 choices, right? You've got 4, and all 4 are beginners, intermediate, and advanced. I call it foundation because it sounds better. Nobody wants to be a beginner. The fact is, you'll rarely use advanced in the brain gym because if they're already at an advanced level, what the hell do they need it for? They're ready for the brain skills. As a design principle, I decided that 3 gave good choice. Because if I don't give any choice, it's like, well, you don't give me any choice. And if I make 10 choices, it's like complicated. There's way too many choices. So I figure, what the hell? Let's go with 3. Because you go into the fitness places, beginners, intermediate, advanced. Then there's like extreme and like psycho. But 3 is enough. The truth is that most everybody that you work with in the brain gym, the level of any of the 4 is going to be foundational. That's the truth. You just start, simple things done well work well. Yeah.
I understand you're explaining 2 things. You're explaining the levels and
The types.
moving towards assessment before you leave the explanation of coordination.
Yeah, okay. I'm making it more complicated than it needs to be.
I have a question about coordination of the type.
Yes.
There's been recent indication in research that schizophrenics have a sequencing problem with stimulus, understanding
Yes.
the stimulus before the thought. And
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
essentially the same thing as coordination?
Strongly related.
Okay.
That's sequencing. Okay, I'm making it harder than it is. I'm not going to talk about the assessment thing. I'm not going to talk about the 3 levels. I'm just going to talk about the 4 types, all right? I made a mistake by trying to talk about 2 things at one time. Okay. So I'm going to begin again. It's easy. There are 4 kinds of brain exercises in the brain gym. One is coordination. And coordination deals with the degree of change. The greater the degree of change, the more difficult it is. And some people can't do big signal changes. Their brain doesn't do that well. And I give the analogy of the dance machine where they can make little steps, but the very same pattern, but with different degrees of change, and they lose their ability to coordinate their body.
And you're speaking analogously in terms of change as space, but change as
Well, in this
time.
case, but yeah, no, it's not time. It is, for example, I can, it's like, it's the way I designed them. I mean, it's not exactly, but that, okay, the signal gives you 2 hertz, 4 hertz, 2 hertz, 4 hertz. So that's not a very big degree of change. But 2 hertz, 8 hertz, 2 hertz, 8 hertz is actually a substantial change. It even moves from delta theta towards alpha. So, and then if you've got 2 hertz, 12 hertz, 2 hertz. That's a big jump for the brain because the signal is so different. The frequency is so different. Some people are, it's like playing a guitar, how fast can you get from the major to the minor when it gets physically further apart and further apart? The degree of change. Having multiple signals all with different degrees of change is the biggest challenge for the brain. When you play music, I'm pointing to Robert because he's a guitar player, right? That, the more you've got to jump by distance, the degree of change from note to chord, that's like harder.
In the beginning. Yeah.
In the beginning, it's harder.
Definitely.
So there are some people that with their brains, with our brains, that thing doesn't work too well. So guess what? If you fire it, you wire it. You can actually train their brain to jump different degrees of change in the signal.
And that's where you're talking about foundation, intermediate, advanced.
That's what I'm talking about, just the coordination exercise right now.
The 3 levels.
Yes, so that it's just the same thing. It's like exercise that you start at the simple level, and once they feel comfortable with that, then you can increase so that they jump from here to here, and then from here to here, right? But not everybody can go from here to here, so they can't play the tune. And so there are many brains that can't jump big degrees of difference in signaling. So you'll see that they will not seek out stimulation that has large changes in it. They'll have an aversion to it. They won't like it.
So the physiological changes will show the comfort level to increase to the next level.
Yeah, we'll talk more about how and when to increase. So I want to keep it a little bit more simple right now. Get an idea first about the exercises. Then we'll talk about the levels of exercise and then how to know. Okay, so the first one, and I tell you, if in the brain gym, if there was only foundation coordination, that's the only choice you had, it would be very, very, very useful. All right? Almost all the time, it's the primary place where you're going to go. If there are 4, and I'll name the other 3, normally what you do is you focus on the ones that need it the most. If a person is already flexible enough, why spend time in that machine in the gym? They've got the flexibility. You're just wasting clock time. They can already do the sport that requires flexibility because they've already shown isolated flexibility to be adequate. Don't waste your time. Typically of the 4, and I'll get to the other 3, for every single one of us, 1 or 2 of them are going to be helpful. That's just kind of like the statistical average. Because let's think about it on the optimum side. How many people in your life, and don't think about like the brain, just think about them, the whole soma, their behavior, everything. How many people in your life in coordination and agility are at an advanced level? Their flexibility is at an advanced level. Their endurance and stamina is at an advanced level. And their strength is at an advanced level. Maybe a few in their prime Olympic athletes would qualify in all of those 4 categories as advanced. But, this is an anomaly. It's in the machine, but it's theoretical. Let's face it, on a practical level, most of the time you're going to be at the foundation level on any of the 4. Because that's why they're there. If they're already at an advanced brain level in those functioning, any kind of composition, any task that they're involved with, they're probably doing pretty well. They're not going to be representative of the people that end up under your light. The tendency is the people under your light are the people that need it. So, coordination, you get it. It's the degree of change. The second one is flexibility. That's the complexity of the pattern. So going back to the dance analogy, the machine thing, one is you just, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. Okay. It's a little bit complex. It's not linear. It's kind of at an angle. And the next one is right foot, but then angle over back. And the pattern starts to become more complex. You have to be more flexible in your ability to change direction. Right? So there is the complexity of the signal. Because I can have 2, 4, 6 as a signal, right? 2 hertz, 4 hertz, 6 hertz. That's pretty linear. What happens if I have 2 hertz, 7 hertz, 5 hertz? That's a little bit different. You're kind of going up and down. It gets more complicated. What happens if I have 2, 11, 5, 9? It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Could you repeat that again? What were those? So that signals in the brain are not singular. Signals are like, they're chords, they're runs. Sometimes you do single notes, but even then, what note follows what note? And sometimes, I'm doing this because of the guitar. He's a great guitar player. So, you've got notes, you've got runs, you've got sequences, you've got chords, you've got keys. And on and on and on it goes.
Yeah.
Right? Music is the way it is because the brain is the way it is. I've said this before in our events. It's not a coincidence that we like music. Like, oh my God, isn't it weird that we can make music and we really enjoy it? I mean, what an amazing coincidence. No, music is the way it is because our brain is the way it is. So, when you break down music, you realize that a composition is built upon fundamental elements. And the brain is built upon fundamental elements of signaling. One is the ability to go with different degrees of change. That's the coordination. The other is the complexity of it. Some music is pretty simple. Some tunes are really complex. You wouldn't suspect it. Jazz can really throw you curveballs all over the place. So some of us need help in exercising the ability of the brain to follow increasingly more complex signals. You see, if you can't do that well, and you're introduced to a brain skill composition for higher problem solving or something, the probability of integrating that lesson is going to be low because in that composition, there are going to be a lot of complex elements. But you can't do the complex element even as a singular exercise, as an isolated exercise. So if you can't do it well as an isolated exercise, how in the world do you expect to integrate it smoothly in a composition, meaning what I'm doing with my life in that moment, the task I have or whatever it is? That's why when you go into the brain skills, which is the subject of tomorrow, you have to recognize that all these compositions are built on fundamental elements of your brain being able to process those kinds of signals. And some of those signal types you don't do very well.